Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. What could bring comfort to a cancer patient? Find out next. You are listening to Advanced Studio Classroom. My name is Brandon. I'm your host for today. It's June 21st, and we begin our lifestyle article. Here in the studio with me, I have two panelists. First, welcome, Pauline.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. And we also have Rebecca Kredinsky here with us today. Welcome, Rebecca.
Oh, it's great to be here.
And we are talking about a serious subject, but it's also bringing beauty into pain, really. We're talking about cancer, which we do often in advance, but we're talking about gardens for cancer patients. Before we get into the specifics of what this does for cancer patients, I just want to ask our panelists, do you enjoy gardening or maybe going out and viewing flowers and nature or something, Pauline? I think most of us who know you know the answer to that already, but share it with us.
Yes, well, I think most people know I love nature. I love going out and enjoying other people's gardens or just, the gardens that nature creates on its own out in the wild. Gardening itself, actually, some of you might know I used to work with my husband and his family's bed and breakfast and butterfly garden in Costa Rica, and my main role was working in the butterfly garden. And a lot of the work there was actually gardening. It was finding the plants that the host plant for the butterfly and propagating them so that they would be a living for the butterflies to do their life cycle with. So actually, I got really into gardening when I was down there. That's the only time I've ever really done gardening, but I'd love to get into it again.
So can you tell us a little bit? I'm interested in knowing more about that. What did that entail? Like, what did a day look like in the gardens of Costa Rica?
Oh, well, a lot of different things. Of course, it involves a lot of watering. It also involves weeding and pruning, trying to get rid of the bad plants that you don't want so that there's more of the good ones that you do want. I also did a lot of just hiking around and looking to try and find the exact type of flowering plant that I wanted for the garden, or maybe not flowering, just the type of plants that were the right kind for butterflies. So I would go out and then I would take cuttings of those plants, bring them back to our area, and try and get them to propagate in our garden. So I did a lot of that.
Pauline, does that mean that you kind of know the names of a lot of different plants? Like you see one out in nature and you're like, I know that one, I know the name of that.
Well, I am very specialized in some very specific types of plants.
Okay.
So, for example, in Costa Rica, in the neotropical area, there are a lot of butterflies that use different types of passion flower vine as their host plant. So I got really good at being able to identify those. I always had my eyes out for that. So I will actually still see those in Taiwan. I just have developed an eye to look for passion flower vines. There aren't as many varieties here, and they're actually not a host plant for butterflies here, but I do still end up noticing those because that was like kind of my specialty.
That is cool. All right, Rebecca, do you enjoy gardening or maybe just viewing flowers in nature? Everyone likes to see flowers, I guess, but do you have a special interest in them?
Yeah, I actually really like what Pauline was saying. I enjoy other people's gardens because I really enjoy looking at flowers or especially other people's gardens or out in nature, but I don't garden myself. My dad did. My dad had a vegetable garden in our home, and he spent a lot of his free time doing his vegetable garden. Yeah. So I helped sometimes, but it's a lot of work. Like Pauline was saying, there's a lot of weeding you have to do, a lot of watering, and then gardening is a lot of hard work.
It is a lot of work, and I remember my grandma, she was basically a small farmer. She would have a vegetable garden as well. She would grow corn and beans and all sorts of things. I remember helping her with some of that. But I'm not so familiar with the flower garden. I enjoy flowers and so forth. But some people, Pauline, they find it very therapeutic. Did you find that to be the case in your work?
Well, I think many people would say that just being outdoors is really therapeutic, right? Being out in nature. And then I think there is something really good about working with our hands. And, sometimes you say getting your hands dirty, and it doesn't literally mean getting your hands dirty. Sometimes that means just like getting in and doing something. In this case, though, literally getting your hands dirty. And I think there is something good for the spirit about that. And for many of us who work office jobs or inside, just sitting at a desk, it's actually, I think, a really positive thing both for our spirit and for our bodies to go out and do physical, work outside in nature.
We have to sometimes force ourselves to do that, right? And we use this word therapeutic. That means it's just good for you. It's kind of like going through a therapy session with a counselor, so to speak. It's good for your soul. Well, we are on page 36, and right now we'll have our first reading. We'll read the left-hand column there down through line 19.
Gardens for cancer patients. Cancer survivors find comfort through gardening. As Kelly White Rubin listens to the sounds of hummingbirds that flutter nearby, she works in her garden, digging out the bee balm that spreads with reckless abandon. Some might consider this work, but to White Rubin it imparts a sense of calm. Listening to birds sing, feeling the sun on her face and reveling in the miracle of watching seedlings grow into something beautiful or tasty does her soul good, even as it requires physical exertion and stamina. 19 years ago, White Rubin didn't have much stamina. After her first routine mammogram at 40, she was found to have breast cancer. She underwent 2 surgeries, radiation and chemotherapy over the course of about a year. I was pretty weak when I was going through therapy and had a 2- and a 4-year-old, she remembered. But after I got my strength back, I started working in the yard.
Well, we meet a lady here at the very beginning. Her name is Kelly White Rubin. And she's listening to the sounds of hummingbirds that are fluttering nearby. And when you see that word flutter, I actually think of a bird, Pauline.
I usually think of butterflies, but that might be
too.
my...
Yeah, that's true. I wonder why.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, it's like a flying, sound of wings flying.
And it's like the quick flapping of the wings, right, in a delicate way.
Right. I guess you could also maybe say that, the curtains are fluttering in the wind, that sound of something moving, vibrating quickly in the air.
Right. So she's working in her garden and she's digging out the bee balm. Now, I was not familiar with bee balm before reading this article, but it is an herb of the mint family and it actually attracts hummingbirds and butterflies and bees.
Oh, interesting.
Are you familiar with this?
I am not familiar with that. I would have assumed that it was a weed because she is trying to dig it out. She's trying to get rid of it because it's spreading all over.
So to her, it was kind of like a weed because it was spreading all over. That's what I thought too because she says, that it's spreading with reckless abandon, Rebecca.
Yeah, reckless abandon. It means there's no structure to it. It's just spreading out. And when I think of reckless abandon, I think of banana trees because here in Asia we have a lot of banana trees, and banana trees are amazing. Once you have one in the ground, you don't need to plant another one. It will propagate itself, and the whole land will be full of banana trees because that once happened to my backyard.
Really?
So when you have reckless abandon, it means it's just there's no rules, there's no structure, it's just going free.
That's great. You never need to buy bananas.
That's right. And it's not necessarily a negative thing. We use the word reckless abandon also in terms of a people's behavior. We might say she threw herself into the dance with reckless abandon. And it does have kind of a wildness, but it's also unconstrained and can also include a sense of joy.
Right.
But here we're kind of using it actually in a more unusual way, but it's really talking about how this you just can't control. It's that wild, uncontrolled.
Yeah. All right. Well, some might consider this work. So if you don't enjoy gardening, maybe you want some flowers, you have to go out and you have to pull the weeds. You consider it work. I would probably be that way. I would consider it work. But to White Rubin, it's not work, is it, Rebecca?
It imparts a sense of calm. And impart is basically to give something a feeling basically a feeling. So she receives a sense of calm, you can say. She feels very calm.
Right. She gets this sense of calm, and then she's listening to the birds sing, and she's feeling the sun on her face. So you get the idea here. It's a relaxing atmosphere.
Right. I like the word that we use here. It says reveling in the miracle of watching seedlings grow and all these different things. Reveling is just like a beautiful word for describing like a great deal of joy. Like you're really taking a great deal of joy and satisfaction in something. And it's just like an extreme, like an extra level of joy.
Yeah.
Like it's a very high level of enjoyment.
So we see here she's enjoying this process. She's taking it all in, basically. And then she's talks about the seedlings growing, and she describes this as a miracle. A seedling is a young plant grown from a seed, and they grow into something beautiful or tasty, right? Maybe she's growing some vegetables and so forth. And that does her soul good.
Yeah, I really like this phrase, does your something good. There used to be, for a very long time in the United States, we used to have these milk ads that says, milk does the body good.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was just like kind of a catchy way of saying is healthy. Or in here, does her soul good. You could also say is good for your soul, but it's just like a different turn of phrase for that. And they're kind of contrasting. While on one hand, it is work. It requires it. It does take a lot of physical work, exertion, stamina. It means like hard work over that's not just like a burst of it. You have to do it for a while. But it's good for your soul, and it's also relaxing while being exerting, which sometimes we don't think of those things as going together, but they're saying it really does for her.
And physical work can be that way. It can be hard work, but it can be rewarding in the sense that maybe it provides some sort of therapeutic value.
Right, and just because something's not relaxing for your physical body, your body is exerted and not feeling relaxed, it might be relaxing for your spirit, for your mind. You know, takes your mind off maybe your worries because you're just putting all your focus on just a physical task. So sometimes, you know, laying on the couch may be physically relaxing, but may not be the most relaxing for your mind or your spirit, right? It might leave you too much space to just be thinking, and being upset, which is not relaxing for your spirit, right?
Right.
Versus maybe being in the garden, working hard, really relaxes your mind and soul.
Very good. So that brings me to a question. What is an activity that you like to do that kind of refreshes you, that kind of does something to your soul to refresh it? Rebecca?
Well, for me, it's swimming.
Okay.
Because I have back problems. And because of my back problems, I had to learn swimming. And when I swim, my back doesn't hurt. And then my mind feels very calm.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah.
For me, it's usually hiking outdoors. I also, I'm not a fast hiker because I like to revel in nature around me.
I'm going to stop and look at this.
I have my camera with me, and I'm stopping every other minute to take a picture of any bug I see, turning leaves to see if I can find caterpillars.
So if you're really
or
in just for the hike, don't go with Polly.
Don't go with me. I always warn people. But for me, it's very relaxing. It does take, I don't think about anything else because all of my focus is just on like trying to like find all the little treasures in natures that are around me that if I'm not really paying attention, I'll miss. And for me, that's very relaxing because, like you said, it takes your mind off all the other things you might be worrying about or thinking about and makes you present to just that time and place.
That's great. For me, it's running, which I've shared that many times. I like to run. But one reason I like to run is because I can do something else while I'm running. I can listen to something and kind of feed my brain, and that can be very therapeutic as well. So you can think about what is something you can do to kind of add life to you. And for these people, it's gardening. And we talked about the words exertion and stamina already. Of course, exertion can be physical or mental, and the stamina can be, the physical or mental strength to do something. Well, 19 years ago, Rebecca, what happened with Kelly White Rubin?
She went in for a mammogram, and a mammogram is basically an X-ray of your breast. And this is a procedure, or this is an exam that usually women don't do until they're 35 and over. And during this exam, she found out she had breast cancer.
Mm-hmm. Now, she said this was her first routine mammogram, and that can be kind of confusing. Why do you say first routine, Pauline?
Well, just because she's going to start taking,
Yeah.
right? Like Rebecca said, this isn't a test or a exam that you do in your younger years, but when you start taking them, then you know you're going to start a routine of it. Usually once a year you do it. And 40, is not terribly old to start doing that.
No.
Like Rebecca said, some people start a little earlier, especially if they maybe have some family history with it. They'll be told, maybe you need to start taking a mammogram once a year a little sooner. But 40 is about the average time. And it was a shock for her, though, because this was her first time to go in. It's just a routine every day, not every day, but kind of just the normal thing that she knows she's going to have to start doing once a year.
Maybe on a yearly
just
basis, yeah.
just a little check, and all of a sudden she gets this really devastating news that she has breast cancer.
Right.
And it sounds like it was pretty serious. She had to do 2 surgeries plus radiation and chemotherapy over the course of that next year.
It is devastating, and that's why the American Cancer Society gives you suggestions for when to get mammograms. They say all women should begin having yearly mammograms by age 45 and can change to having mammograms every other year beginning at age 55. And of course, if you're younger, you can do it if that's your choice, but that's what they suggest. And so sometimes we don't want to go to the doctor, but we need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it really depends on your body as well, because even though the recommendations, the age is a lot older, some women, their bodies need mammograms more because it's easier for their bodies to develop lumps or I guess you call them bubbles in your breast. Like, for example, I do mammograms routinely because my body is one of those bodies that need more checks because it's just easier for me to develop bubbles or lumps.
Yeah.
So it's just
know your
something I
body,
have to do. So you have to know your body. But I think the key here is it's really important to get routine medical exams because when you do routine, which is like you do that, like let's say once a year, once every 2 years, you do routine medical exams, you can often identify the problem earlier.
Yes, key.
Right. Absolutely. And going back to that kind of our storyline here of, it says she's been doing this hard physical work in her garden and doing weeding and, stuff that takes physical exertion and stamina. We've heard about that in the first couple of paragraphs. And now we get this contrast of, 19 years ago when she was 40, all of a sudden this happens to her. And radiation and chemotherapy are hard on your body, and she didn't have stamina. All of a sudden, she was very weak. She couldn't be out there gardening and weeding and, digging in the dirt. And I was thinking, it reminds me that when you're healthy, going out and doing hard physical labor like weeding or digging holes just sounds like work. It does not sound like, oh, what a joy that I can go out and do that, right? But then when that's taken away, right, and in this case she got it back, it sounds like you suddenly realize what a gift it is that you're able to go out and do that work, that you can engage in life in that way. And I think there is a really important lesson there as well.
That's right. We often take our health for granted, and then when it's gone, we get sick, we realize, wow, what a gift that is.
Right. Why wasn't I taking advantage of it when I had that strength to go out and do those things?
Really good point for all of us. Well, she says she was pretty weak when she was going through therapy. She also had a 2- and 4-year-old at the time, so imagine going through all of this cancer treatment, and then you also have 2 kids at that age. That's not easy, of course. But after I got my strength back, she said, I started working in the yard. So in our next section, we're going to learn more about some of the flowers and some of the butterflies and bees and all those kinds of insects and so forth. So let's get into that as we go to our next reading. We're going to be on the right-hand column, and we're going to go down through line 14.
White Reuben gradually transformed her yards into an oasis, replete with herbs, berries, 3 seasons of flowers, and the wildlife they bring: butterflies, bees, orioles, and blue jays. She and her husband, David Rubin, enjoy sitting in the garden, surrounded by a revolving door of seasonal color from hyacinths, bluebells, lupines, Chinese lanterns, hydrangeas, bridal veil, feverfew, tiger lilies, and oriental poppies. White Rubin daily enjoys the retreat she's created. I just feel very relaxed when I'm working in the yard, she said. I don't know what it is about a garden. There's just something about it.
Kelly White Rubin says that she transformed her yards into an oasis. The writer describes it that way. I like that description. You know, what is an oasis for you, right? For me, it's running by the riverside. I love that. I would describe that as an oasis. What do we mean, Pauline, when we're talking about something as an oasis?
Well, usually it's a place that we think of as beautiful and imparts peace.
I think it comes from the desert, right? You're going to the desert and there's an oasis. I guess that's the literal term of that. There's some water there, right? And it refreshes you. So what refreshes you for White Rubin? It is this garden. And she describes it here, and she starts off saying, Rebecca, it's replete with herbs.
So replete is basically just well supplied or full of, full of herbs, berries, and lots of flowers.
Yeah.
Right, so there's not just a few. It gives you the idea of it's just abundant. It's just full of these things, full of herbs and berries and three seasons of flowers and wildlife. It's just giving this idea of just abundance, so much happening in this garden. And not only are all these plants, but it's also attracting wildlife. They tell us butterflies, my favorite, bees, orioles, and blue jays. Orioles and blue jays, just so you know, those are types of birds.
Yeah. So she and her husband, David Rubin, they enjoy sitting out there in the garden, and they're surrounded by a revolving door of seasonal color. That idea of a revolving door is it's everywhere, right? A revolving door goes round and around, right? And so it's the idea of they're surrounded by all of this beauty. And we get a description here of what types of flowers that they have. And maybe you're familiar with some of these, maybe some of them you are not. Unfortunately, we don't have pictures of all of these. It's kind of a lot to describe at once, but you can do more research on that if you're interested in those.
Well, and this is an example of details that really aren't important for understanding the story.
That's right.
And the author, I don't think, really cares if you know exactly what these flowers are. It's just to add to this sense of it's not just one type of flower that they have there. As you read it, you just realize, oh, there are a lot of different flowers, probably lots of different colors. And if you know a few of them, it just adds even more of a picture in your head.
That's right. So White Rubin daily enjoys the retreat she's created. So she can just go to a retreat right there in her own yard. She says, I just feel very relaxed when I'm working in the yard. And she says, I don't know what it is about a garden. There's just something about it.
Yeah, I like this phrase. There's just something about her, you can also say, which means it's always a good thing, I would say. We pretty much always... Well, actually, no, maybe not. I guess it depends on how you say it. Because you're like, I don't know. There's just something about her.
The tone matters.
You're right. Actually, it could be a negative thing.
Yeah.
So it can mean so many things. It's something about.
Yeah.
It is really vague.
You can't quite put your finger on it.
I have a feeling or there's something going on here that I can't quite pinpoint. And depending on the tone of how they say it, there's something good or there's something not good. Here it's good.
Yes, here it is good. And that is a good phrase to know. It's kind of vague and on what a person means by that. They're not quite sure about it. But in this case, it's something really good. Just can't quite put words to it. Well, as we come to the end of today's program, we're going to have one more reading to kind of give more background to maybe why people gain so much from doing this type of gardening. As we go to our last section, entitled Stopping to Smell the Roses, we'll find out more about that.
Stopping to smell the roses. Karen Gleason believes that something is inner peace. As Vice President of Cancer Services for Northwell Health, she sees firsthand the stress, both physical and mental, that cancer patients experience. This is a difficult time in their lives, she said, and having the ability to go to a garden setting gives them the ability to stop and transform by looking at the beautiful colors, sights, and scents. It's a peaceful and timeless environment for them to go for a while.
So we're stopping to smell the roses. That's a phrase we sometimes use in English just to mean stop and relax. Enjoy life. Sometimes we're so busy, we don't do that. So we say, stop to smell the roses. Take some time out to relax and have some time to think. Well, here, Karen Gleason, we meet her. She is the Vice President of Cancer Services for Northwell Health, and she believes that something is inner peace. Now, we were just talking about there's something about it, and this is what she's referring to, Pauline.
Right. So that something here is like a noun referring back to what is it about gardening that is so special? And she's going, oh, I know what that something is. That something is inner peace. It goes back to that idea that a garden imparts a sense of calm, imparts a sense of inner peace.
That's right. And Karen Gleason says she sees firsthand the stress, both physical and mental, that cancer patients are going through, right? She's dealing with that with her work, and it's difficult, of course, for them. And she tells why gardening can be helpful, Rebecca.
Well, basically, gardening is helpful because they basically stop and smell the roses, like the title of this that we have here. Literally, they go into the garden and they forget about their cancer or about their painful chemotherapy or radiation therapy. They're just there to enjoy the moment and just maybe smell the flowers that smell good and look at the beautiful colors.
And what's great, it's right there in their own front or backyards, right? They don't have to go somewhere. Maybe they don't feel very well, but they can just go outside, sit on the patio, and enjoy the flowers and also all of the insects and birds and so forth that they are attracting.
Right. I mean, I think there's something really healing about beauty. So if that's some people, that's going to be going out on a hike, going to the beach, being able to enjoy the beauty of nature and let that really speak a sense of, all is well with the world. Kind of, I think that's kind of the message that you're hearing when you're in really beautiful, peaceful spaces. And that's a message that's really obviously one that needs to be heard by somebody who's going through such a difficult time, to just kind of have this sense of like, here's a space that feels like things are right and good and beautiful, and that can really speak to people's hearts in a difficult time. And if you have that right in your backyard, that's all the better because it's much easier to access that then.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today. We are all out of time, but tomorrow we will continue our discussion on gardens for cancer patients. Until then, this is Brandon.
I'm Pauline.
Rebecca.
Saying goodbye.
Goodbye.